Part B focuses on the concept of power. To understand the concept of power, it is necessary to understand the different dimensions of power, and this is what we will do in this unit. Power is difficult to define because it is a multidimensional concept. Power can be functional, it can help you to achieve something, or can be dysfunctional because you can use it by self-interest or to avoid the achievement of something. Power can also be legitimate or illegitimate. It can be used consciously or unconsciously and can be also applied intentionally or unintentionally. In this picture, for example, illustrates political behavior. The photograph suggests that the person in the middle have or holds power because of his dress, location is in the center stage, he has open arms, there's people listening to him, he uses technology, a microphone. So there are many signs that he has power. But how do we know why or how this person has power? In order to understand that, we need to understand the three dimensions of power. These are the three dimensions of power that can help us to understand what really power is. As we can see here, power can be an individual property, it can be a relational property, and can be an embedded property. Different properties do different things and act in a different way. Power can be seen as something that you can possess. There are two sources of individual power, structural and individual. Structural sources of power are sources of power that are related to the organizations in which you work. For example, it can be related to the formal position that you hold in the organization, or to whom you know, or the extent to which you have access or control over information or maybe over resources. Also, it is related to the centrality of your unit to the business. Remember, is your project core or is your project margin? If it is your project core, your project will be more visible and you will need more power, more resources, more information in order to go ahead than if your project is a marginal project. Finally, power also is related to the knowledge and skills that you hold in order to solve critical problems or in order to reduce uncertainty in your project. That is, you need to be seen or you need to be perceived as knowing how to reduce uncertainty by defining components or boundaries or interfaces of the problem. You are not solving the problem, but you are defining its boundaries, timelines, or interfaces. Individual sources of power are directly related to your own skills and experience that you have in the organization. And of course, this involves not only energy but also sensitivity and ability to read and understand other people, flexibility to select different means to achieve your goals, and the ability, of course, to play that subordinates role and the team member in order to enlist support for your project. For example, power can also be viewed as a relationship between one individual and other individuals. That is, it depends on the beliefs of other people. There are five power bases and they are all interrelated. For example, reward power is based on the belief that the project manager has access to rewards. Coercive power is based on the belief that the project manager can apply penalties or sanctions. Referent power is based on the belief that the project manager has abilities and personality traits that should be copied. Legitimate power is based on the belief that the project manager has the authority to provide instructions. And expert power is based on the belief that the project manager has superior knowledge relevant to the specific situation. These power bases have three characteristics that we need to consider. First, bases of power depend on the belief of others. And we know that beliefs and perception shapes our behavior. So whatever other people believes about us, it is important. It is the perception of others that it is important. For example, a project manager may control rewards, but if others do not believe this, they may be unwilling to comply with the project manager's request. The second characteristic is that all these five power bases are interrelated. Using coercive power, for example, implies in losing referent power because they are different, contradictory. And finally, the project manager may use a combination of those power bases. You don't need to use one or the other one. Usually project managers use combinations of power bases. In order to improve your individual and relational power, you need to build what we call referent power. And as you can see in this list, referent power is very important and it is not time consuming. It is not costing, it's not difficult to develop over time this type of referent power. But there is an issue with the individual and relational forms of power. The issue is that these views of power overlook the less visible, the structurally embedded elements of power. And this is what we call power as an embedded property. Power has a hidden, invisible, embedded dimension that is difficult to detect or to recognize. And this is power as an embedded property. This refers to power relations embedded in the natural running of day-to-day activities of the project. It includes take it for granted ways of doing things, unwritten rules of the organization, organizational culture, values, expectations that are combined in such a way to create a fabric of implicit, invisible norms that shapes people's attitudes and behaviors, that influence the distribution of power across the organization. This means that power is embedded in organizational structures, in organizational processes, organizational rules, and procedures, giving some individuals or units more access to information, decision-making power, or resources. This is what we call non-decision making power. That is, controversial issues are excluded from informal conversations and formal decision-making process. Organizational procedures are invoked to exclude people in subordinate positions from decision-making. And also, power brokers decide outcomes backstage. This means that organizational structures, rules, systems, and procedures are not politically neutral, but they may be perceived as neutral and thus go unchallenged. This invisible or embedded dimension of power is used to support particular arguments or agendas, to advance a perspective or a vision, or to challenge and block initiatives. So it is very political. The point is that it is mostly invisible. And we as an experienced project managers, we need to be able to read the situations and to understand these non-decision making forms of power. Then, non-decision making power refers to the ways in which key people work behind the scenes to ensure that processes, situations, or rules are constructed to prevent those with complaints or demands from expressing their views openly. The events that you can see in the slides leads to a situation in which concerns are not raised. Individuals passively accept the existing order simply because they anticipate that resistance will be ineffective. This is the idea of non-decision making power. This situation is called mobilization of bias. That is, when informal rules of the game are designed to systematically benefit some people and disadvantage other people. Usually, embedded and non-decision making forms of power look for conformity of the majority to accept the natural order of things that exists on our day-to-day activities. Thus, political skills involve the ability to recognize, use, manipulate, resist, and challenge the contextually embedded and invisible features of power. A very good example of forms of no decision making power here in Australia is the famous tax brackets that usually remain unchanged year by year, but because the increasing cost of living, that means that we ain't paying more taxes every year, and the government has not explicitly made any decision to increase taxes, but this rule is already embedded in the tax brackets rule of the Australian Taxation Office. Then this is a good example of a non-decision making power. The government has not made any explicit decision to increase taxes, although they are getting more and more money from our taxes because the rule it is embedded this way of working. So the question now is, what do we do if we are in a lower power position? We need to remember that even if we are in a lower hierarchical position, if we are politically skilled, we can develop some of the power mechanisms that I have already mentioned to achieve our goals and the goals of the project. Why? Because the powerful are human beings, and this means that they can make mistakes. That is, as everybody else, they have limitations, and we know that nobody's competent 24/7. Everybody have their weaknesses, and we are doing multiple mistakes all the time. This means that the politically skilled project manager knows the other party and knows what game the other party is playing. And this will be an advantage because if we know the power games that the other party is playing, we can develop some specific strategy to counter that strategy. This means that the politically skilled project manager knows how to exploit the limitations and the weaknesses of all those in power in order to get things done, in order to achieve the goals of the project. So, it is possible to challenge, to resist the powerful by understanding the name of the game, by knowing your power basis, by knowing the basis of power of the other party, by knowing how the embedded dimension of power is used. If you are able to deal with these aspects, you will be able to develop specific strategies to challenge the powerful and to go ahead with your project. To finalize, please watch this video that is available in Learning at Griffith and is possible buy and read this book about power. Jeffrey Pfeffer is a professor at Stanford University, and all his life he has been investigating power in organizations. How do we use it, and how we can cultivate this power in order to achieve our goals.